Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 on this Tuesday with Andrew DiCecco is brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit, find out how. Go to PropSwap.com, download the PropSwap app today. Super Bowl Sunday right here on 97.3 ESPN. The Bengals arrived in L.A. today. They will practice at UCLA, and the Rams are obviously already in town. I think they are going to be practicing at the Coliseum. Apparently, it's very windy out there. We got Super Bowl week. We got more. The coaches are pretty much all hired, and the Senior Bowl is in the books. Perfect guy to talk to about all those things right here. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com as he joins us on a Tuesday edition of Football at 4. Andrew, what's up, man?
Hey, Mike. Doing well. How are you?
All is well, and we had the Senior Bowl this weekend. We will get into that. We obviously have the Super Bowl coming up. I do want to get your take because I tweeted this out earlier today, a little bit of, close to home inside the NFC East. I think the Giants are finally getting things right there, Andrew. I like Dable. They brought in Martindale as the defensive coordinator. It feels like the Giants are finally on the right path.
Yeah, I tweeted something myself that they're putting together a heck of a staff, and just all around from the head coach to his primary coordinators there, you have to like the competence and the consistency that he's surrounded himself with and the innovative minds. And I think that they're going to have a explosive, fast-flowing team based on the coaches and their backgrounds. I think you're going to see a vastly different Giants team for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I know the fact that now I guess the big question will be they got a new GM in there. They brought Dable in who worked with Josh Allen. Do they want to stick with Daniel Jones? We can kind of transition over to the quarterback play this week at the Senior Bowl. Or is there somebody there that they might say, hey, you know what, I'm a new coach. I want to bring in my own guy. I think that's probably the biggest offseason, question with the Giants. Well, they got a lot of questions, believe me. But they have 2 picks. Do you think that new regime is going to be happy with Daniel Jones?
I think they're going to try and see if they can make it work, because the one thing that I don't expect them to do is to force a pick here, right? I don't think that you're going to see them think, we need a quarterback, let's take one with one of our picks, with one of our premium picks. If that isn't necessarily the best player on the board, I think that's a recipe for disaster, and that would sort of set off a domino effect to start this new regime, and I don't think that they're willing to do that unless they become, like I said, enamored with the prospect throughout the process. But I think that their best course of action, in my opinion, would be to wait until next season when the options are a little bit more enticing and see what you have here, Daniel Jones, see what he can do when he works with Mike Kafka there. I think that Mike Kafka might be able to get a little bit out of him and, kind of see if they're able to iron out some of his deficiencies and get him to be the quarterback that they always envisioned him to be when they drafted him in the first round a few years ago.
Yeah, and Andrew DiCecco, follow him on Twitter at @DiCeccoNFL. You tweeted out that as well. Giants are putting together a hell of a staff. They brought in Wink Martindale, Don Martindale, who was the DC with the Ravens. You can imagine that they're probably going to have a much more aggressive D here. Now, Patrick Graham was a good coordinator, but this is probably an upgrade.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because Patrick Graham did a very underrated job with that Giants team. It's easy to look at the Giants as a whole and sort of poo-poo them as a whole and sort of disregard it. But Patrick Graham really, I thought, made the most out of that defense and really got them all to elevate their play. And I thought that he was really he is a really sharp-minded defensive coach, and I think that he's going to have great success at his next stop. But that said, I think if they did upgrade there and getting Wink Martindale, I think you're going to see a lot more of an aggressive defense attack style, and it'll be interesting to see how they sort of stockpile the players in which, and for him to be able to execute what he wants to do. So that's going to be a team I watch pretty closely, and how they accumulate their personnel and allocate their resources in which to get these players in place for Wink Martindale to be able to run his scheme.
Yeah, so as much as the NFC East has been, down recently, I think the Giants are getting it right. I think Washington They had a lot of injury issues there. They need to get their quarterback. If they can get a quarterback, they might be taking a step in the right direction. Dallas probably, it still has the roster to continue to win, and obviously we know where Philadelphia is. So this division as a whole, Andrew, it feels like this is a pretty interesting offseason that the whole East can kind of take a step forward. The Eagles have a lot of picks. The Giants have a couple picks. Washington, they might be able to get a quarterback in this draft. So it feels like this division is kind of getting ready to take a step forward.
Well, at least on paper, it seems that way, right? I mean, the coaching is a lot more formidable than it has been in recent years. I would say you outlined some of the one question mark, the glaring question mark with Washington, which is quarterback. So I think that's until they find that and stability there, I don't think that they're going to be viable contenders, even though their defense is quite strong and imposing, and they have a lot of good components there for long-term success. I still think they need to build that offense a little more, particularly at the quarterback and offensive line positions. But outside of that, the one team I'm interested to see, like I said, how they sort of shape their personnel and revive and sort of flip the script there is the Giants, because they've had a very putrid offensive line in the past. Daniel Jones has been very inconsistent, to say the least. And their pass catchers haven't been overly overwhelming either. So they have a lot of work to do, but I think if they have the right coaches in place to sort of be able to follow a blueprint and have some success in the future.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. All right, Senior Bowl this weekend. I know we talked on Thursday, and you gave us a bunch of guys that you were kind of watching. Who were some of the players at the end of this process, at the end of this week, have now kind of changed maybe where they were last week?
There's quite a few, and I don't want to spoil it too much because I have an article coming out tomorrow at InsideTheBirds.com where I outline all the guys that sort of stock up, stock down type thing. But a few guys that I would say really helped with Travis Jones, the interior lineman from Connecticut. Very big guy. He's over 320, I believe, and he's just very athletic, was dominating the interior lineman, and I thought that he really showed that he could feasibly be the top defensive tackle taken, or at least state his case to do so. I thought that he really showed well, particularly on one-on-ones. Perrion Winfrey, a pair of sacks, 3 tackles for loss in the game. I thought he's somebody that really emerged and stated his case, made him more of a household name, I would say. There's a number of guys. Mario Goodrich, the corner from Clemson. Everybody talks about Andrew Booth. I thought he's another player who is long, 6 foot, 185, very aggressive, instinctive, fluid type player. So, there's a handful of guys that I thought really helped himself.
I think a lot of people, we were talking earlier, actually yesterday, about the whole quarterback thing and where the Eagles sit at 15-16 and how many teams in front of them might be in play for a quarterback. And we kind of went through this list and are like, this team might be there. There's not a definitive team. Is there one team in that top 14 that jumps out to you that says one of these quarterbacks this week that I saw, Willis, Pickett, Sam Howell, Matt Corral, who wasn't there, did one of those guys do enough this week to put them in the top 15?
I don't think so, at least not yet. I mean, we'll have to see how the Combine fares, how they fare at the Combine and how they interview and these top 30 visits and everything. And, maybe sometimes the final piece of the puzzle is how they conduct themselves in the interview process and how they win over a coaching staff from a football intellect standpoint. And that has yet to be determined because I haven't really had a chance to do so. But that could be the difference between, a late first round guy and elevating him to the top half of that first round based on how they fare in that aspect of it. But right now, I think it's a little too premature to say that anyone has. If anyone had, I would say it would be Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, Pickett, I don't know. What did you – obviously, without really seeing him at practice all week long, he played in the game. The game doesn't really mean as much, but it doesn't sound like he had this eye-opening week where he was definitively jumped out and said, oh, man, he's the guy. If you want a quarterback, he's the one. It still seems that there's probably, a lot of conversation at that position.
Oh, yeah, and like I said last time, I think Malik Willis was a player that really helped himself over the week. That said, there are a lot of question marks in his game as well. So there's Kenny Pickett has the more substantial and body of work, and I think he has the safest ceiling. Whereas I think that when you look at someone like Malik Willis, he has more just the intangibles and the sheer talent, I think, to be one of those difference makers and someone that can really elevate an offense. Whereas I think Kenny Pickett's going to be a good pro, but a little bit more of a stabilizing presence. I think not an every run-of-the-mill starter, but I think that he'll be a competent starter, but nothing overwhelming.
Let me ask Gardner. I've seen his name a lot recently. And there's going to be, the corners I feel like are going to be kind of linked to Philly a lot. Who's your favorite corner of this group after the week?
Right now, I don't think anything's changed for me. I like Andrew Booth a lot from Clemson. I like his ball skills. I like his fluidity. I like his aggressiveness. I think he has the innate ability to flip his hips and run with anyone. He can defend a number of receivers of all shapes and sizes. And I like his instincts. There's a lot to like about a lot of corners in this class, but for me personally, I like Andrew Booth the best right now, with Sauce Gardner a close second.
All right, so linebacker we know has been a conversation a lot. A lot of people like Lloyd. Nakobe Dean's the other guy. But if you got Harris in round number 2, Christian Harris in round number 2, would you say, hey, that's a win? They got picked 54, by the way, in round 2.
That's actually the player that I take mock drafts for what they're worth, but that's kind of how I think that he will be available when the Eagles are picking at 50 in the top of the second round there. So I had him going to the Eagles because I think that you can find great value still at that position there. Chad Moom is another player from Wyoming, another linebacker he was also at the Senior Bowl and had a great week, but I think that he's another player that could be in play in the second round, late second, perhaps. But I think that Christian Harris, he has a skill set that translates very favorably to the current NFL. Being able to match up with a number of different athletic skill players that are moving around formations. I think that you need to have a viable second-level player, sort of like a Darius Leonard, that can do a number of different things. And I think Harris gives you that ability, along with obviously Devin Lloyd and Nakobe Dean as well. But I think Harris would be tremendous value at the top of the second.
All right, Andrew, some of these mock drafts, and as you said, take them for what they're worth. I love mock drafts. They're fun just to kind of see, get inside the mind of what players could be going in an area, not directly that your team's taking them. But Tyler Linderbaum, a lot of people look at offensive line and say the Eagles have a really good offensive line, but obviously Kelsey is up in the air. You don't know whether he's going to play or not. But if you said at the end of the day you got Linderbaum with one of those 3 picks, he feels like almost one of the safest picks you can take in this draft.
Yeah, I would agree. And you have to look at the Eagles' penchant for or longstanding history of fortifying the offensive and defensive line. So I think that that's a very likely possibility that he's going to be certainly in the conversation as one of those options. And I think you're getting a plug-and-play starter at center. I think he also offers the ability to play guard, but I think his long-term home and where he's going to be most effective is going to be at center. And he, in many ways, his game reminds me a lot of Jason Kelsey in that he's just a tenacious player, gets after it, smart, and just tough and gritty. So he's a player that would fit right into the Philadelphia mentality, and I think the fan base would love him right away.
All right, there's 3 guys I get asked a lot about. You probably can break them down a little better. It's Trayvon Walker, who you touched on a bit, Ojabo from Michigan, and then Jermaine Johnson, who really I feel like has come blasting off the charts here recently. Do you have a favorite of that crew?
Right now, I would say Jermaine Johnson, and he's a player that sort of emerged, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but he had an interesting road to the draft, right? I mean, he was at Independence Community College, which is a JUCO school that was profiled in season 3 of Last Chance U, dominated there. Then he went to Georgia and was mildly productive, and then he went to Florida State and really took off And I think he really grew into his body. I think he developed a vast array of pass rush moves. I thought he was pretty strong and anchoring against the run. I think there's certain areas of his game that really became refined over time, and he's much more complete than what he was a couple of seasons ago. And at 262 pounds, I believe he can still add another 10 to 12 pounds to his 6'5" frame and be just a dominant force.
Oh, we lost Andrew DiCecco. Just kind of, faded out there here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, DiCecco NFL. And you can check out his work. He said he's coming up with a rising stock from the Senior Bowl over at InsideTheBirds.com. So check out his stuff over there. We'll see if we can't get him back on the air here. And if we do, I want to get his thoughts on, we talked about Linderbaum, who is the offensive lineman from Iowa, who, I got to be honest with you, I don't think the Eagles really need to go with an offensive lineman because I think their line is pretty strong. They have a lot of other holes to fill, but we do know that is an area where they do like to build, and we have the whole situation with they don't know with what's it called, Kelsey, but we got Andrew back on. We just lost him there. How you doing, Andrew? Sorry about that. Josh actually walked out of the room for a second right when you faded off the phone. That's why he wasn't able to pop you back on. But what you got you back on, and what I wanted to follow up with is you have 15, 16, and 19. Should Howie Roseman be looking at an offensive? We talked about Linderbaum. I should have followed up there. But should he look at an offensive lineman in one of those three spots? Or is there too much best player available talent in some of those defensive areas to pass on?
Yeah, that's a good question. But where I sort of have Linderbaum slotted is right around 16, right in that mid-range. So I don't think that would be a reach. And I think that you can't go wrong there. There's going to be a Trayvon Walker that's going to be there. Jermaine Johnson is a player that's going to be there. So it all depends on where they sit on their big board. But I think that all three of those guys could really be in play for the Eagles, especially looking at their history, obviously, as we touched on, for the trenches. And I think that it wouldn't be a reach at all if they went for a center. Obviously, that's not going to be a player that's going to a lot of people are going to be enamored with right off the bat. It's not somebody that's going to yield a lot of excitement. But, I mean, what he's able to do is, as a plug-and-play player is going to be, he has all-pro ability. But, yeah, I have a feeling that you're going to see an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman with at least two of those picks.
Right, I agree with you. And to further that, Andrew, if Kelsey comes back, there would be a possibility that you would have a first-round pick who wouldn't play at all his first year because Linderbaum might sit on the bench watching Kelsey,
Yeah, that's true. But then you also look at long-term. You're going to have Jordan Mailata. You're going to have Landon Dickerson. You'd have Linderbaum there. So you have some long-term pieces to make a run.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and they drafted Dickerson last year with probably intent to not have to play him maybe at all, having him watch for a year and then maybe take over, and obviously injuries happen. Kelsey, if he comes back and ends up getting hurt, you have your guy. But having Linderbaum, Dickerson, and Mailata next to each other for the next 10 years, that is an attractive. Like if on draft day you ended up with Linderbaum, you might be disappointed because it's not the sexy pick. But, man, when you see those guys, the three of them together for the next however many years, that would be a very formidable offensive line.
Yeah, and that's what it would be. You would be looking at long-term success, and I think being able to sort of stockpile and solidify that side. If Jalen Hurts is your guy, great, and if he's not, well, then you can get the quarterback next year. But you have a young offensive line, young components there to really build around, and then you have a young receiver, and all of a sudden things start to come into play, and you're going to be a viable offense, a viable football team for that matter, for the with a lot of building blocks for the foreseeable future.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, InsideTheBirds.com. What's the piece you're working on for tomorrow?
Senior Bowl prospects, those that help themselves, sort of where they're at after coming out of that Senior Bowl week.
All right, and Andrew will be on tomorrow, so we'll take a look at some of those people that he thought helped themselves. Check that out over at InsideTheBirds.com. DiCecco NFL on Twitter. Football at 4 with all the latest. We'll get into some Super Bowls. I want to get Andrew's thoughts on the Super Bowl matchup because tomorrow will be the last time he's on, so we'll break down some of these matchups in the Super Bowl with him tomorrow here on the Sports Bash. Andrew, appreciate it, man.
You got it. Talk to you tomorrow.
That's Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 from InsideTheBirds.com as we do it each day at 4 o'clock.